My name is Elena Voss, 35 years old. I work as a financial analyst for an investment company in San Diego, the kind of job where numbers behave better than people ever do. The salary is good, the hours predictable, and the logic comforting. 3 years ago, after my divorce from Brian, I did something reckless for once in my life. I bought a beach house. It cost $1.5 million, every penny from my settlement. But when the sun drops behind the Pacific and the sky bruises into gold and violet, I know it was worth it. The sound of waves is my lullaby. That house, glass and cedar perched above the shore, is my proof that something in my life belongs only to me. My parents live 40 minutes inland in a spotless neighborhood that smells like citrus and control. My mother, Deborah, has never met a situation she couldn't orchestrate. My father, Thomas, mostly nods along, the diplomat between storms. Then there's Madison, my younger sister, 28, effortlessly charming, always the favored one, though she never asked for it. Our relationship has hovered in that lukewarm space between affection and quiet rivalry. One Tuesday, I left work early after realizing I'd forgotten crucial client documents at home. I rarely come back midday, but deadlines don't negotiate. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed my mother's car parked by the curb. She had a spare key for emergencies, a privilege I'd never revoked. I was sliding my key into the lock when voices drifted through the open windows. The ocean breeze carried them clearly. "This house is perfect for the wedding," my mother said. "Absolutely perfect. The ocean view, the deck, the living room, exactly what we need." A pause, then Madison's uncertain voice. "Are you sure Elena will be okay with this?" "Of course she will," Mom replied, almost laughing. "This is family property. She owes us after everything we've done for her. Besides, she never uses the space properly. It's wasteful." My hand froze on the lock. Family property. The phrase landed like salt on a wound. They kept planning. Seating charts, white roses and lilies, string lights, 200 guests. Not once did they mention asking for permission. I stood outside my own front door, listening to my mother design an entire wedding in a home she didn't own. I should have stormed in, but curiosity chained me still. How far would they take it? I backed away quietly, got into my car, and drove to a cafe downtown. The latte I ordered went cold, untouched, while I stared out at nothing. 2 hours later, I returned. The house was silent, both cars gone. I didn't call, didn't text, just waited. A week passed before my mother called, inviting me to dinner. "A family celebration," she said, her tone sugary and rehearsed. At the restaurant, Madison beamed beside a man I'd never met. "Elena, this is Jacob Miller," she said, "my fiancé." He was handsome in that polished, careful way. Good suit, good teeth, good manners. The dinner blurred into laughter and small talk, but I couldn't shake the chill in my chest. When I excused myself to the restroom, I passed the entryway and froze. My mother was on the phone, her voice light and bright. "Yes, Veronica, everything's coming together beautifully. Madison's wedding will restore the family's reputation after Elena's unfortunate divorce. Finally, something to be proud of." I stayed behind a decorative palm, my hands trembling. So that was it. My success was invisible, my independence and embarrassment to be overwritten by a perfect wedding. I walked back to the table and smiled as if nothing had happened. A few days later came another invitation, dinner at my parents' house with friends from the club. When I arrived, 3 manicured women sat in the living room, each glittering with quiet judgment. I hadn't even taken off my coat when my mother stood, tapping her glass with a spoon. "I have an announcement," she said. "Elena has generously agreed to provide her beautiful beach house for Madison's wedding. Isn't that wonderful?" The women turned to me, expectant smiles already forming. I saw the trap instantly. If I said no, I'd be branded selfish, the bitter divorced daughter ruining her sister's big day. My throat tightened. "Of course," I heard myself say. "Happy to help." Polite applause. Madison hugged me. My mother's smile glowed with victory. That night, I drove home in silence, hands gripping the steering wheel. Somewhere between the city lights and the dark curve of the coastline, something inside me cooled into clarity. Over the next weeks, the invasion began. Mom and Madison arrived constantly with fabric samples, floral sketches, Pinterest boards. They floated through rooms I'd designed for peace, rearranging furniture to see how it would flow. They spoke in the language of ownership. "We'll need to move this. We'll have to paint that." Once, Mom said casually, "It'll be so much better than a hotel. Hotels are so impersonal." I smiled, nodded, and filed it all away. That night, I opened my laptop and ordered 3 miniature recording devices, the kind that activated when they detected sound. I hid one behind a picture frame in the living room, one inside a kitchen cabinet, one in the dining room. Then I waited. 2 days later, while I was at work, they let themselves in with my mother's key. That evening, I sat at my desk, the glow of my monitor painting my face in cold blue light. My pulse thudded as I downloaded the files and pressed play. My mother's voice filled the room, rich with authority. "Elena owes us for being born. Children should obey their mothers. That's how families work." Madison murmured something I couldn't catch. "Honestly," my mother continued, "Elena's always been good for nothing. At least her house will finally be useful for something." The words sliced through me, clean and slow. I listened again and again. By the third replay, the shock was gone, replaced by something steadier, clarity. If they saw my house as a stage for their performance, I'd rewrite the script. By morning, resolve felt like a new muscle in my body, tender but functional. I forwarded the audio files to a private drive, labeled them by room and timestamp, and sent a message to a colleague who owed me a favor. "Do you have a bulletproof property attorney?" Quiet, fast. A minute later, a name pinged back. Jennifer Harris. Her office downtown smelled faintly of toner and eucalyptus. Frame degrees, a neat desk, a glass wall looking over a slice of San Diego traffic. Jennifer was in her early 40s, hair clipped back, the kind of compose that suggests she'd rather skip small talk and solve things. Perfect. I told her everything. Not the ocean poetry, not the bruised sunsets, just the facts, surgically clean. The house, the wedding, the assumption of ownership, the trap announcement, the recordings. She took notes on a legal pad with a thin black pen, every click of the nib puncturing the air like a metronome. "First question," she said, looking up. "Sole ownership?" "Yes. Purchased post-divorce, my name only." I slid a folder across the desk. Closing docs, proof of funds, title insurance, tax notices, utility bills, a neat paper trail. Numbers have always been my armor. She skimmed, nodded once. "Good. Second, a spare key. Who has it?" "My mother. For emergencies." I didn't bother disguising the bitterness in quotes. "Change the locks," she said, almost gently. Not because of malice, because boundaries are legal, not sentimental. I felt something uncoil in my chest. Done. We moved to strategy. Jennifer flipped her legal pad to a clean page and drew a timeline, boxes for each weekend, arrows and dates. "You don't want a direct confrontation beforehand," she clarified, "but you need to prevent unlawful use on the date." "Exactly." She wrote "block" across the wedding weekend and capped it with a box. "You have every right to lease your property for another purpose, so long as it's lawful and properly permitted. Film companies are efficient. They notify the police for traffic and crowd management, put up fencing, post signage, clean paper trail, easy enforcement. If anyone tries to enter, security and police can point to the permit and the lease. It's preemptive, not aggressive, and if your family disputes it, the law still reads the same." I watched her box in the wedding date, creating a cordoned-off island in time. Relief flared, surprising and bright. Find me a crew. Give me 24 hours. It took her 8. That evening, I sat cross-legged on my living room rug while the Pacific thudded outside like a second heartbeat. An email arrived from Pacific Studios. "Love the look of your property for our beach house exteriors. Are you available the weekend of dates?" Yes, I was. The next day, the location scout toured the house. He had a laminated set of stills and the nervous energy of someone who solves 10 problems an hour for a living. He circled the living room, stepped onto the deck, looked back at the house, then at the ocean. The lines, the light, perfect. He talked permits and fencing, gear trucks, and crew call times. He never once asked who else owned the place. He asked the only question that mattered. "Is this yours to lease?" We signed a contract for $5,000. It was notarized and filed. The production notified the local police department and submitted all the necessary forms. Jennifer reviewed every line and sent her quiet double-check thumbs up. All good. Paperwork beats volume. I changed the locks that afternoon. At night, I lay in bed and listened to the water, replaying my mother's voice until it lost its power. Elena owes us for being born. My father's silence hovered like fog at the edges. The house seemed to understand. Glass settling, wood easing, the structure holding. Numbers behave. Structures hold. People? Not always. 2 weeks before the wedding, at 11:42 p.m., my phone lit my ceiling in cold blue. Madison. I swallowed a sigh and answered. Can I come over? Her voice was raw, a scraped violin string. 20 minutes later, she stood on my porch in pajama pants, a coat thrown over them, mascara smudged in half-moons beneath her eyes. I made tea while she looked everywhere but at me, fingers worrying the sleeve hem. I don't think I want to marry him, she said finally, words falling all at once. I don't even know if I love him. I leaned against the counter. When did you know? Somewhere between the cake tasting and the seating chart, she said, a terrible little laugh escaping. Mom picked him. She introduced us at a club event and then curated everything. My dress, the menu, the guest list. I just kept agreeing. She glanced up. Do you ever feel like if you make the wrong choice, Mom will erase you? The honesty cleaved me open. Yes, I said, for most of my life. Madison nodded, eyes wet. She told California Lifestyle the house has been in our family for generations. She exhaled a shaky breath. I should have told you. I'm sorry. For a moment, the room tilted. The house I bought with my own settlement, rebranded as a family heirloom for optics. It was almost comic, except it wasn't. What do you want, Mads? I asked softly. She looked at her hands. To make my own choices. To stop being curated. We sat in the living room where she planned to say vows on a deck she didn't ask to borrow. The recording device behind the picture frame was silent now, the room full of ordinary sounds, our breathing, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the ocean sliding its palm along the shore. I wish I could fix it, I said. Can you just be here? She asked. Until I can decide? I made her tea and tucked a blanket around her shoulders. She cried into my sweater like she did when she was 8, when a neighborhood girl wouldn't share glitter pens, and our mother said, we do not cry over trivialities. We compose ourselves. It struck me then, how often we'd been taught not to feel, only to perform. I didn't tell her about the film crew, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because the truth, once loose in our family, never traveled straight. You're protecting the boundary, I told myself. You're not punishing your sister. Still, guilt rustled through me, an old habit. When Madison left, the house felt briefly hollow, then steadier. I stood on the deck with my hands on the railing and looked at the dark seam where water met sky. A gull cried once and was gone. Somewhere inland, the story of us marched toward its tableau, string lights and laundered smiles. But on this cliff, the air smelled like salt and something honest. The next morning, I met Jennifer again. She slid a thin folder across the table, stamped permits, insurance proof, the lease, the police notification memo. On her whiteboard, she'd outlined a clean timeline with check marks beside each item. In a fight like this, she said, capping her marker, the first story to the public often wins. Your mother seems to understand optics. So do we. She gave a magazine an origin story for my house, I said, an heirloom narrative. Jennifer's mouth tilted, something between sympathy and amusement. A charming fiction. Fortunately, county records do not read California Lifestyle. She tapped the folder. If anyone shows up to contest access, the on-site security will direct them to the permit. The officers will do the same. Your presence is not required. I'll still be there, I said, surprising myself. Across the street, she guessed. Observing. Good. Let them be the ones who don't belong. On my way out, in the lobby, a young couple argued quietly about whether to buy a townhouse or keep renting. Their whispers braided with the sigh of the elevator. I wondered what stories they'd be told about what was theirs. That night, Dad called and hung up before I could answer. A minute later, a text. Your mother is under a lot of stress. Try to be understanding. I stared at his message until the screen dimmed. Understanding had been the currency of my childhood, paid to the wrong account. Day rolled toward day, and the house grew into the plan. The production coordinator sent a call sheet with arrival times, security placements, and equipment lists. A diagram showed temporary fencing across the front and along the beach access, signage points at the driveway and gate, commercial filming in progress. No unauthorized access. My home was being translated into shapes and arrows and control, the language my brain trusted. The week of, Madison didn't call. My mother did, twice a day, sweet reminders, disguised as directives. We'll need you to remove all personal art from the living room. The rental company will store chairs in your garage overnight. Do you have an outdoor outlet for the string lights? I responded with non-committal syllables, letting her voice fill the space until it blurred into static. On Thursday evening, I drove past my parents' house. Lights on in every room, silhouettes moving through choreographed preparation. My father's figure paused at the window, hand lifting like he might wave, like he might invite me in and say, "I'm sorry, I should have known." He didn't. Back home, I set out 3 glasses and poured water to the same measured line in each, an old trick to quiet my mind. Balance, calibration, a minor sovereignty. On the counter sat a yellow legal pad with a short list, penned in my hand. Locks changed. Lease filed. Police notified. Evidence saved. Boundaries held. Somewhere in the city, Jacob was at a tux fitting. Somewhere else, my mother rehearsed a toast. Across the hall, in my guest room, a dress bag I'd offered Madison months ago hung untouched on the closet rod. A soft champagne slip she'd once loved before white and lace were decreed. I closed the door gently. At 9:03 p.m., an email slid into my inbox from Pacific Studios. Final confirmation. Trucks arrive, 6:00 a.m., Saturday. Fencing at 6:15, security brief at 6:30, signage posted by 7, attached, permits stamped with the city seal, dates crisp and irrefutable. A second notification blinked across my screen, almost on top of it. Calendar invite from Mom. Title, rehearsal. Final count. Time, Saturday, 9:30 a.m. Location, Elena's beach house. 2 stories, 1 address. I clicked accept on the film crew's schedule. I did not reply to my mother. The wedding morning began with silence, the kind that comes before impact. I woke before dawn, the air cool enough to fog the windows. The tide was rolling in slow, heavy breaths, and for the first time in weeks, I felt calm. The storm I'd been waiting for was finally about to break. By 6 o'clock, I was seated at a cafe across the street from my house, a place with wicker chairs and a veranda that offered a perfect, unobstructed view of everything. From my table, I could see the Pacific Studios trucks pull in, white, boxy, efficient. Men in black shirts and lanyards hopped out, unloading equipment like clockwork. Lighting rigs, reflectors, portable fences. They moved with the rhythm of professionals who had done this 1,000 times. By 6:30, my front lawn was a construction site of order. Warning signs went up. Commercial filming in progress. No unauthorized access. The sun was just beginning to tint the horizon peach and gold. I sipped my coffee, hands steady. At 8:45, the first van arrived, a catering company. The driver stepped out, confusion creasing his brow as he read the sign. He made a call, gestured toward the house, then pointed at a man in a reflective vest. The man shook his head, clipboard in hand, pointing to the permit. 10 minutes later came the floral truck, then another with folding chairs. All of them stopped at the same invisible line, trapped between 2 conflicting realities. I saw one of the guards walk over to the driver of the flower truck. He held up the city-issued film permit, pointing to the date in bold print. The driver's mouth dropped open. He shook his head, called someone, then climbed back into his truck and drove away. I stirred my coffee and waited. At 9:12, my mother's silver SUV appeared. Behind it, a sleek black sedan, Madison and Jacob. I leaned forward, heart thudding softly. Madison stepped out first, a gust of wind catching her veil. Even from this distance, I could see her trembling hands clutching the hem of her wedding dress. She was stunning, fragile, expensive. Jacob looked sharp in a tailored navy suit, but his expression already hinted at irritation. My mother emerged, regal as always, wearing a cream suit and oversized sunglasses. She marched toward the fencing like a general leading a charge. The guard met her halfway. I couldn't hear their words, but I could read the choreography, the authoritative wave of her hand, the clipped tone, the moment she pointed at the house, at the camera crew, at Madison in her dress. The guard remained impassive, showing her the papers, tapping the city seal with one gloved finger. My mother's posture stiffened, then exploded. Even from across the street, I saw her shout. Her hands carved through the air. Madison flinched. Jacob stepped back, muttering something under his breath. Then the police arrived. 2 cars, lights flashing softly in the morning haze. They spoke to the guards, read the documents, then turned to my mother. One officer shook his head, gesturing toward the street. The other pointed at the no trespassing sign. My mother's voice carried across the road, sharp and cracked with disbelief. "This is our property. This is family. She wouldn't." But I had. Within minutes, the scene devolved into confusion. Guests began arriving in clusters, men in suits, women in pastel dresses, clutching gift bags and phones. They slowed as they saw the chaos, exchanging uncertain looks. Some filmed, others whispered. A woman I didn't recognize asked another, "Is this part of the shoot?" The other shrugged. "I don't think so." From where I sat, I could see Madison standing near the car, staring down at her bouquet. Jacob was beside her, scrolling through his phone. He said something short. She shook her head, tears streaking her makeup. Then he walked away. No goodbye, no explanation. Just got in his car and drove off, leaving her in the street in a dress that cost $8,000. The police were still talking to my mother, who now looked less furious and more lost. Her face, usually taut with control, sagged in disbelief. A hand pressed against her chest as if to steady her own heart. The officer gave her something, probably a copy of the film permit, and gestured toward the exit. Behind her, the wedding guests were dispersing like birds startled by a shot. Some offered awkward pats on her shoulder before slipping away. Others took one last photo, curiosity outweighing decency. The florist van pulled off. The catering truck followed. The string quartet, who'd arrived late and confused, carried their instruments back to their car without ever playing a note. Madison stood there alone, the veil fluttering weakly. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. My mother reached for her, but Madison turned away. I ordered another coffee. By 10:30, the crowd was gone. The only people left were 2 officers, a few crew members, adjusting lighting, and my mother's car idling by the curb. Madison finally got in, dress pooling around her like a defeated cloud. They drove off. Across the street, the film crew continued as if nothing unusual had happened. Cameras rolled, someone yelled, "Quiet on set," and I laughed under my breath. My phone buzzed on the table. Calls. Messages. Mom. Mom. Dad. Mom again. I didn't answer. Then came the texts. "Mom, how could you do this to your own sister?" "Mom, you've humiliated this family." "Mom, we spent tens of thousands on this wedding. You will reimburse us immediately." The final message came a few minutes later. "Mom, this is unforgivable." I typed one reply. "I'm not giving you a cent. You planned a wedding at my house without asking. That's on you." Then I blocked her number. The afternoon dissolved into quiet satisfaction. I watched the film crew wrap up for the day, the yellow vests glinting in the sun. The house stood unscathed behind the fences, calm, dignified, untouched. By evening, I drove to my friend Rachel's apartment downtown, where we opened a bottle of wine and sat on the balcony. I told her everything, from the recordings to the lease to the chaos. She listened wide-eyed, then said, "That's brilliant. Cold, but brilliant." "I didn't want revenge," I said. "I just wanted boundaries that hold." The night deepened around us, and for the first time, I felt lighter. But peace never stays unchallenged for long. 2 weeks later, my father called from an unknown number. His voice was low, heavy. "Elena, your mother is sick. Breast cancer. She starts treatment next week. She didn't want to worry anyone, but she had to tell the truth eventually. There's a fundraiser online. People are already helping." The line went silent, leaving only the hum of traffic outside my window. After we hung up, I opened Facebook. There it was, my mother's post, a long, heartfelt paragraph about her diagnosis, a link to a GoFundMe page, dozens of sympathetic comments. She'd already raised $12,000 in a single day. I scrolled through her photos, the charity luncheon, the garden party, the club gala. Her smile never looked strained. Her complexion glowed, no hospital gowns, no fatigue, just cocktails and polished pearl earrings. The realization settled cold and certain. She was lying, again. I opened a new folder on my computer and titled it Evidence, Phase 2. I began saving screenshots, photos, posts, every timestamp, every location tag. By midnight, the folder was full, and the battle lines were redrawn. For days, I collected proof like a detective building a case. Every photo my mother posted, every brunch, every fundraiser, every polished appearance was time-stamped evidence that she wasn't spending a single day in chemotherapy. She was weaponizing sympathy now, just as she'd weaponized guilt, image, and family pride before. But this time she'd chosen the wrong opponent. When I wasn't at work, I was piecing together her pattern of deceit. A week after the fake diagnosis appeared, my sister called. Her voice sounded hollow, stripped of energy. "Elena," she said softly, "Jacob's gone." Gone? His phone's disconnected, his apartment's empty, he just vanished. A cold prickle climbed my spine. "Have you checked social media?" "I can't, his accounts are private." "I'll handle it." It took me less than 10 minutes. I found his Facebook profile, locked, but with a new profile photo. He was smiling beside a woman I didn't recognize, her hand resting on his chest. I clicked her name, Amanda Wu, entrepreneur, public account. Her latest post from 3 days ago was a picture of her left hand, a diamond ring glittering in the sun. The caption read, "He finally asked. Can't wait to marry my best friend." Tagged Jacob Miller. My breath caught, but not from surprise, from confirmation. I took screenshots, photo, caption, tags, and sent them to Madison. She didn't respond right away. When she finally called, her voice was small. "I was a backup plan," she said. "He was with her the whole time." "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "Do you want to come over?" "No," she whispered. "I want to show you something. Something I found in Mom's attic." She arrived 30 minutes later, her face pale and tight. In her hands was an old, leather-bound journal. "I found this while packing some of the wedding things," she said. "It's Mom's diary." The cover creaked as I opened it. Her handwriting was delicate, slanted, elegant, like everything she presented to the world. But the words inside were poison. "Madison is so easy to control. She'll take care of me when I'm old. Elena is too independent. I need to make her feel guilty, keep her manageable, convince her not to go to graduate school. Too much distance, too much ambition." My chest felt tight. I flipped to another page. "If I can keep them both close, they'll never leave me. Madison will obey. Elena will argue, but she'll stay. She always stays." Madison covered her face. "She planned everything, didn't she?" "Yes," I said, "every thread." Then I saw another entry dated around the year of my divorce. "Brian doesn't see it yet, but he's too good for her. I'll help him realize she's unstable before it's too late." I dropped the diary, bile rising. "She wrote about Brian," I said. Madison looked up sharply. "You need to show him." Part of me wanted to burn the journal. Another part wanted to march straight to my parents' house and make her read it aloud. Instead, I picked up my phone and dialed my ex-husband. He answered after 2 rings. "Elena? I know it's strange, but can you come over? It's about my mother." There was a pause. "Give me an hour." When he arrived, he was carrying a cardboard box. He looked older, softer around the eyes, the kind of exhaustion that comes from fighting ghosts you can't name. He set the box on my kitchen table. "I've been meaning to get rid of this," he said. "But after your call, I thought maybe you should see it." Inside were dozens of letters, all from my mother. I picked one up carefully. "Brian, I'm worried about Elena's emotional stability. She's been erratic lately. Please don't confront her directly. She might lash out." Another letter. "Elena doesn't listen to reason. I think she's losing touch with reality. You need to take control before she hurts herself. Or you." I stared at the neat handwriting that had always signed birthday cards and dinner invitations. "She sent these while we were married?" "At least twice a month," Brian said. "And she called me constantly. She said you were talking about leaving me, that you were cheating, that you said terrible things about me behind my back." The words punched the air out of me. I remembered every fight that had come from nowhere, every seed of doubt that had sprouted into a full-blown argument. "She told me you were cheating," I said. Brian laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. I guess we were both her projects. We sat in silence. The hum of the refrigerator filled the space where years of misunderstanding used to live. Finally, he asked, "What are you going to do?" "Madison and I are confronting her," I said. "Tomorrow." He hesitated. "Do you want me there?" I nodded. She can't deny this with witnesses in the room. The next morning, Madison picked me up. Her hands shook on the steering wheel. "If I back out, remind me of Jacob," she said with a weak smile. "I will." We drove in silence, the coastal highway flashing silver under a cold sky. Brian followed in his car. When we pulled into my parents' driveway, my mother's car was there. So was my father's. The house looked just as it always had. Immaculate, symmetrical, deceitful. She opened the door, startled. "Elena? Madison? I wasn't expecting—" "We need to talk," I said. "All of us." Inside, my father was in the living room reading the newspaper. He looked up, confusion knitting his brow. "What's going on?" Madison's voice trembled. "Mom, we know. About everything." My mother frowned. "Excuse me?" "The fake cancer," I said. "The GoFundMe. The lies." Her mouth opened, then closed. "I don't know what you're talking about." I pulled out my phone and showed her photos. Her at luncheons, her at the club, her at a fundraiser the day she claimed to be in treatment. "You're not sick. You defrauded people." She took a step back, color draining from her face. "Elena, this is a misunderstanding." "Is this a misunderstanding too?" Madison said, holding up the diary. "Because we read it, every word." My father's gaze flicked between us. "What diary?" "This one," I said, scrolling to a photo of the entries on my phone. "You might want to read the parts where she talks about manipulating us, about sabotaging my marriage." I gestured toward Brian, who stepped forward and placed the letters on the table. "She wrote to me for years," he said. "Told me Elena was unstable. Tried to convince me to leave." My father's hands trembled as he picked up one of the letters. "Deborah," he whispered, "please tell me this isn't true." My mother's eyes darted wildly, looking for escape, for justification, for anything. "I was trying to protect this family," she shouted. "Everything I did was for you, for both of you." "No," I said quietly. "Everything you did was for control." The room went still. Madison spoke next, her voice steady now. "You're going to close the GoFundMe, return every dollar, and you're going to get therapy." My mother's mouth opened again, but no sound came out. "And if you don't," I added, "we'll file charges for fraud, and we'll tell everyone the truth." Her face crumpled. Real tears this time. "I didn't realize. It got out of hand. I didn't mean—" "That's not good enough," Madison said. "You've hurt us for years. We're done." My father sat down, staring at the floor. For once, he didn't defend her. That afternoon, my mother posted a confession on Facebook, a public apology, a statement admitting the illness was fabricated, the fundraiser closed, the donations refunded. Within hours, her social circle imploded. Friends unfriended. Club committees quietly removed her name. She was exposed, humiliated, and finally, powerless. By the end of the week, she and my father sold their house and moved to another city. I changed my number. Madison and I started meeting every other week for lunch. For the first time, our conversations weren't filtered through guilt or comparison. Just sisters, trying to rebuild. She called it her recovery from golden child syndrome. And then there was Brian. We talked often, at first out of shared grief, then out of something warmer. He said once over coffee, "Our marriage didn't fail because of us. It failed because someone else was rewriting our lines." 3 months later, he moved back. And for the first time in years, I believed in beginnings again. The day Brian moved back into San Diego, the air smelled like salt and jasmine. We didn't talk about the past in detail. The past had already written itself in ink. We just started showing up. Dinners that turned into late-night talks, laughter that arrived easier than either of us expected. Forgiveness wasn't instant, but it was deliberate, a quiet decision made one morning over coffee when he said, "Maybe we both deserved a version of love that wasn't supervised." 3 months later, we married again. No venue, no guest list, no grand announcement. Just City Hall, a witness, and a sigh of relief. Madison stood beside me in a pale blue dress, holding a bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked herself. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, Brian squeezed my hand and whispered, "This time, it's just us." We didn't celebrate afterward. We didn't need to. We walked to a small cafe and shared a slice of lemon cake while the city hummed around us. Life finally was ordinary. 6 months later, we sat in a doctor's office staring at the grainy black and white shape on an ultrasound screen. The heartbeat flickered faintly through the speakers, fast, fragile, and impossibly alive. Brian's voice cracked when he said, "That's our baby." I nodded, tears blurring the image. The doctor smiled, handed me a printout, and left us alone for a moment that felt sacred. On the drive home, Brian glanced at me. "Are you going to tell your parents?" I looked out the window, the ocean flashing silver beyond the cliffs. "No," I said finally. "Not yet. Maybe not ever." He didn't argue. He just reached over and held my hand. I knew what he was thinking, that forgiveness is noble, that families can change. But I also knew that some boundaries, once crossed, can't be rebuilt. My mother had tried to control everything, my choices, my marriage, even my perception of myself. I wasn't going to let her touch the next generation. Madison understood. When I told her about the baby, she cried and hugged me, then said quietly, "Then it's our turn to build something healthy." She'd been in therapy for months now, learning to live without my mother's approval. She still slipped sometimes, still called me to ask, "Am I being selfish?" And I'd always answer, "No, you're being free." Our lunches became rituals, simple meals at seaside diners where we laughed too loudly and ordered too much. Sometimes we'd talk about our mother, but mostly we didn't. There wasn't much left to say. I did hear about her once, months later. A mutual acquaintance mentioned she'd joined a small church in another city, that she volunteered at a community kitchen, that she seemed quieter, older. I didn't know if the change was real or just another performance, and I decided I didn't need to find out. My father sent one letter, handwritten, apologizing for his silence. "I thought keeping peace was love," he wrote. I was wrong. I didn't respond, but I didn't throw it away either. One afternoon, I stood on my deck watching the horizon. The same ocean that had once carried my anger now reflected nothing but calm. The wind moved through the railings with a low hum. For years, that view had been my refuge from the chaos of my family. Now it felt like an invitation to live differently. Behind me, Brian stepped outside, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "Do you ever think about them?" he asked softly. "Sometimes," I said, "but not the way I used to. I used to feel like their absence was something to mourn. Now it feels like space to breathe." He nodded. "You broke the cycle, Elena." I smiled faintly. Maybe, or maybe I just stopped feeding it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered the quiet rooms of our house, fingertips brushing over furniture that once felt invaded, now finally safe. The walls no longer carried echoes of my mother's voice or Madison's nervous laughter. Just the sound of waves and the rhythmic ticking of a clock. I paused by the framed ultrasound photo on the mantel. A future, small and perfect, waiting. When the first light of dawn touched the windows, I stepped outside again. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, steady and alive. This was the same house my mother once called family property, the same house she tried to use as proof of control. But now it was something different. It was mine. It was home. It was freedom. For years, my mother had defined love as obedience, loyalty as silence. She believed control was care. And maybe, in her own broken way, she thought that was true. But I had learned something else, that real love is not ownership, it's space. And so I let the tide carry the past away, grain by grain, memory by memory, until all that was left was peace. Madison was right. It was our turn to build something healthy. And as I watched the sun rise over the water, I whispered to the child growing inside me, "You will never have to earn love." The wind carried my words toward the sea, and for the first time in my life, I knew they would never be taken back.